I'm Ann Dolan, and I have with me today my colleague, Kathy Gold. Kathy, thank you for shedding light on this important topic with me.
I'm happy to be here, Anne. You know I love these conversations.
I know you do. So let's talk about executive functions because every day you talk to parents that call our office looking for help for their kids, and they often mention the issues that come along with executive function skills. What exactly are they?
Exactly. And a lot of people don't know. This is a term that's become a lot more common, but there are still people that don't quite understand what it is. So, executive function skills are the foundational cognitive processes that guide goal directed behavior. Okay. And there are a couple examples here on the screen, but time management, for example. So, how long does it take to do something? Being on time to an appointment for a student, turning in an assignment at the appropriate time, and being aware of the passing of time. Organization is another executive function skill, and that could be organization of materials like books and folders and gym clothes. It could also be organization of ideas in a piece of writing, for example, or even organization of digital files on one's school computer or laptop. Self-checking is another executive function skill. And this one, you particularly see this in middle school when students are doing more writing. They don't go back and check their work, right? Or in a math, maybe an assessment, they don't go back and double check and make sure that they haven't, done a miscalculation, okay? Self-checking can also be just checking in with yourself, for example, while you're reading something. Am I understanding this before you keep plowing forward? Working memory is another part of executive function. And working memory, it's different from, for example, long-term memory. So working memory is the ability to hold something in your head that you might need at a later time. And later time could be 1 minute from that moment, or it could be the next day. So a quick example is if a younger student is doing a math problem and they know that, for example, there are 4 horses in one paddock, and by the end of the math problem, it's asking for all of the animals on the farm. If the student can't hold on to that number 4 to use to complete the problem, they get stuck, right? And another example of executive function skills would be flexible thinking. And this is one's ability to think outside the box, to problem solve, also to move to transition. So think about maybe elementary or middle school students that are moving from one activity to the next or moving from one classroom to the next. Being flexible about those things can be tough if one's executive function skills are not properly developed.
Yeah, it makes sense. You can see just from what you've explained that having difficulty in these areas really makes school awfully hard for kids.
Yeah, definitely.
But Kathy, a lot of what you shared feels a little bit like ADHD. Can you talk to us about the difference?
Yeah, and they are so closely related. So ADHD is really a physiological sort of a brain wiring issue, right? It has to do with brain chemicals and that kind of thing. But if a student has ADHD, they 100% will have issues with weaker executive function skills. Okay, that's just the way it manifests. However, there are plenty of people that have executive function skill deficits that do not have a diagnosis of ADHD. And when we work with students at the company, it doesn't really matter to us whether there's a diagnosis or not, because we're still going to support the student in the way that's best for that student. We're going to intervene with tools and strategies. But I always do say to parents that if you think it's having a negative impact on your student in school, that you might want to talk to someone at school about investigating the possibility of a diagnosis so the student could get accommodations built into their daily schedule in order for them to access the curriculum more effectively and easily for them.
Makes sense. Thank you, Kathy. All
Sure.
right. So you talked a lot about executive functions, and there are many of them, but I can see maybe a student being okay in one area, but not so much in another. What happens if one of these executive functions skills gets stuck, kind of like gears that we
Yeah,
have
it's
here about you?
exactly like gears, right? If they're not all moving at the same time, everything comes to a halt. So let's take the top two, the time management and organization, as examples. So let's say we have a high school student who's great at time management, gets places on time, knows how long it takes to get work done, turns things in an appropriate and timely fashion, but they're really disorganized. So this is the student who sits down at night to work and, oh my gosh, I don't have my laptop, or I left the rubric at school, or I don't know where my book is. It's in dad's car and dad's car is at the airport, right? All of those, if the student is weak in the organization areas, you can see how that's going to impact time management, because now it's going to take that student 30 to 40 minutes to even get started on the work, which is going to throw off the whole time schedule. So you can see how one can definitely have an impact on the other.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense, Kathy. But on the flip side, when they're all working together in harmony, a lot of good things can happen too.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the part of my job I love is when after working with us for a couple of weeks, when a parent will call and say, these great things are happening. So achievement in school definitely improves. And, we applaud small victories. So if there's one slight raise in a grade, or if a great, nice, positive comment from a teacher comes along, right? Those are wins. So once the achievement improves, you can imagine then the student feels better about him or herself. So negative behaviors get reduced because the student isn't overwhelmed. They're not as anxious. Let's say, for example, a middle school student who's really struggling with this and has gotten some negative feedback, maybe from teachers or from parents, right? We all have gotten frustrated with our kids. They're going to be defiant. They're going to push back a little. They're going to behave in a negative way. Once they start finding these victories, gaining some confidence, they're going to feel better about themselves. They won't feel the need to engage in those behaviors because they're not trying to push people away. And then the result of all of that is obviously they feel better emotionally, right? They're happier, they're more confident, they're less anxious. And we know as adults, when all of those things are in place, you sleep better, you make better food choices, you get out and exercise. So it improves physical health as well.
That's for sure. Success is definitely a great motivator for kids.
Yeah.
All right. Now, at different times in kids' school careers, their executive functions are taxed more than others. Tell us about these transition years.
Yeah. So we do have plenty of students at the elementary level whose parents and teachers have recognized, okay, there are some issues here. And that's typically your student who can't sit in the chair, who's poking other kids in the room, right? Whose desk looks like a volcano exploded in it. So at the elementary level, there are more things that you want to address, like being a good classroom citizen, having a very basic, simple system like left side, right side of the folder, that kind of thing. When you start to get to middle school, now you have students that don't have strong executive function skills, and they're being asked to maybe handle 6 or 7 different classes and 6 or 7 different binders and 6 or 7 different teachers possibly posting things in different ways on a learning management system. There are so many moving pieces. And middle school is also when we are learning how to learn. So if you don't have those skills in place, it gets incredibly challenging, right? And then let's take one step further. So now you get to high school and you still have all of those classes, all those moving pieces, and the academic rigor has shot up exponentially. So most of these students are maybe even being challenged, truly challenged for the first time. So now they have the weaker skills and all the layers are still there and the course load is crazy. And they've been sort of launched into high school without that nice sort of nurturing middle school model where every student has 6 or 7 pairs of eyes on them. There are guardrails in place. I was a middle school teacher for 27 years, so we knew every student. We sort of walked them through the process. When they get to high school, they're sort of on their own. So you can see how the need and the challenge ramps up.
Yeah, and definitely when they take more AP classes, usually their junior year, there's more expectations for college. We see it again because
Absolutely.
there's so much going on. All right. So, Kathy, why is it important when we help kids with these executive function skills, why is it important to meet kids where they are?
Yeah, this is really important, Anne, because everything we do here at the company is based on something called the stages of change. And it's a known psychological model. It's a continuum of readiness for behavior change. So if you and I were planning on, let's say we were smoking and we were planning to quit smoking, or we were planning to stop a bad food habit or something like that, we would fall somewhere on the continuum of readiness to make a change, right? So some people picture it like a flat number line, some people picture it like a staircase. So for students, we want to know where they are on that continuum, because if we have a student that comes to us, if you're picturing a number line, think of them on the far left of the continuum. This might be a student who doesn't think they have an issue, who thinks their systems are working fine for them, who's really mad at mom and dad for making them do this, right? That student is going to take a bit longer to make progress than the student that comes to us in the middle of the continuum saying, all right, this isn't my favorite thing to do, but I can understand that, it might be helpful. And yes, I'm willing to listen and try a little bit. Okay. And once the coaches, they have their first meeting with the student, they do sort of a soft assessment either through a series of questions, or we use also a research-based curriculum that has a specific inventory. And by using that, the kids answer the questions, the coach knows where they are. So how ready are they? And that's how they start the session. That informs the approach they're going to take. Because if you have a student who's super resistant at the beginning, you're going to approach that student in a way that's far different from a student who comes to the table and says, yep, I'm ready. I know I need this, right? It's just, it's a whole different dynamic.
100%. And, I know that many of our coaches really specialize in resistant kids because we see so many of them. It's very, very common. If something is hard for you, you're going to resist it. You're not going to say, oh, I love doing this. Bring it on.
Yeah.
You often take the opposite approach. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important too, Anne, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
When we work with students, we always, everything that we do is one-to-one. Everything is very customized. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. So if a student, for example, doesn't need work on time management, they're not going to work on time management, right? We have a system that we use that's modular. So it's each module is an area of executive function, but the coaches will only focus on the areas that, having shown through the inventory, right, are the most needy. So it's really a tailor-made approach.
I like it because in the summer, you can work on these skills. And in the school year, you can also work on these skills, but in tandem with their schoolwork. So kids see the generalization. If you just teach in a vacuum without any generalization, sometimes it's hard for kids to see their progress.
That's right. Exactly.
All right. So Kathy, how can parents reach you if they want to talk to you about their child?
Sure. So parents can book a call with me by scanning the QR code right here. You can also go to our website and you can select an appointment. All of our calendars are there. It's super easy. You scan the code, you pop yourself on the calendar. I wake up in the morning, I look at my calendar, I see all the people with whom I'm going to be speaking that day. And then we have a conversation and the parent will share with me what's going on with their student, the grade level, what the issues are, what the challenges are, what the strengths are. And together we come up with, a possible plan for that student, how we might support them to facilitate their success.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kathy, for being my guest and for shedding light on such an important topic.
You are so welcome. I always like to talk to you, Anne.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.